Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to reconvene with the many friends I've made since I first came to the summit 2 years ago. And I'm grateful for the new connections to come as we move through today's programming. Thank you to the GrowSmart Maine staff for putting so much effort and intention into the summit. It's a joy every year, and I'm really excited to help kick off this year's Rural Opportunity Roadmap. As a kid from one of Maine's most rural counties, shout out Washington County, it's especially meaningful to be here as we lift up the leadership, creativity, and resilience that define rural communities here in Maine and across the country. I'm going to introduce our incredible panel and keynote speakers. Before I introduce them, I'm going to welcome them on the stage. It's a little bit of a narrow stage. It's kind of like a whole little production to get everyone up here. So you guys can come on up, take a seat, and I'll get into introducing you all. We have three incredible speakers that bring a level of expertise from their communities and also collectively represent the federal perspective, state perspective, and some hyper-local perspectives, as well as having all their individual intersections to all of those different bureaus, anywhere you're comfortable. You'll see everybody's title slide come up as I kind of transition folks from speaker to speaker, but I do want to introduce the three of them collectively here so you can just get a sense of who's sharing the stage with me. So it's my honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Tony Pipa, Senior Fellow in the Center for Sustainable Development at the Brookings Institute. Tony leads the Reimagining Rural Policy initiative, working to modernize U.S. policy so it truly supports equitable and sustainable development in rural communities. He also directs Brookings' local leadership on the Sustainable Development Goals initiative, connecting local innovation to global progress. Tony brings over 30 years of leadership across philanthropy and public service from his time as Chief Strategy Officer at the U.S. Agency for International Development and U.S. Special Coordinator for the post-2015 agenda at the State Department, to his foundational work launching the Foundation for Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. His career reflects a deep commitment to community-driven development and to ensure that all communities, no matter how small or remote, have the opportunity to thrive. So, welcome, Tony. Next, we have Sarah Craighead Dedmon. Sarah is the town manager in Machias, the former editor of the Machias Valley News Observer, and a freelance journalist focused on the issues impacting Washington County. Raised in New Hampshire after graduating from the University of Nebraska, Sarah worked in the tech industry in Dallas, LA, and Boston before relocating to Maine in 2012. Deeply devoted to the people and the place of Machias, the rural Shire town that raised me, Sarah now lives there with her husband, her 2 children, and 2 dogs. So welcome, Sarah. And then finally, we have Bonita Tompkins, who is a social entrepreneur and passionate advocate for empowering underserved communities. As CEO of the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, CES, in Farmington, Maine, she leads initiatives that address critical community challenges, especially those affecting youth. Under her leadership, CES has become a hub for empowerment and business-focused programming. Bonita helped establish a retail store and makerspace on Farmington's Main Street and launched a tiny home project in partnership with Kennebec Cabin Company and more than 25 Maine-based businesses to address youth homelessness in Franklin County. Now CES is scaling its efforts to develop a new entrepreneurial center for Franklin County, expanding its reach and impact. Bonita is known for her persistence, integrity, and solutions-focused approach to creating systemic change. Let's hear it for the 3 folks I'm sharing the stage with. We're so lucky. And with that, I will welcome Tony Pipa to the podium. It's just this green button for a slide.
All right. So do I need to advance, or are you going to advance me? All right, there we go. So thanks, Larissa, for that introduction, and thanks for having me here. Really excited to be here in Maine. And I'm going to try to do a few things in a short amount of time. One, I'll just talk a little bit about sort of where rural America in general, large generalizations, is today, but if you're a policymaker from Washington, D.C., that's kind of the mindset that you have. Then I'll talk a little bit about federal rural policy, or maybe the lack thereof, and end with, I think, some lessons and themes that we're starting to see emerge from the analytical work we do when we're looking at what's successful in rural communities. So I'll start off just sort of where is rural America today? And first, that phrase rural America belies just how diverse actually our rural communities are geographically, economically, racially, and culturally. And so whatever picture pops up into your head when I say rural America, and I'm sure what pops up into your head is really informed by what it looks like in Maine, it really represents just a small sliver of the nation's rural landscape. A lot of folks think agriculture when they think rural, but ag is 7% of the employment in rural America. A lot of folks think white, yet almost a quarter of the rural population are people of color. And frankly, rural's fastest growing population are people of color, predominantly Latino. And when I talk to people in Washington, D.C., a lot of folks associate rural with economically depressed. And you know, it is true, 85% of the persistent poverty counties in America are non-metro, yet if you look closely at this map of advantage and disadvantage from across the US, which is developed by the authors of The Injustice of Place, you'll also see that rural is home to some of the most advantaged places in the US as well. And that's represented by the light blue in the Midwest. Strong social capital, lower levels of inequality, and it really actually surprised the authors of that particular study. They thought that they were going to, when they looked at the most advantaged places, be looking at Silicon Valley or Boston or, you know, the place where a lot of our GDP comes from. But when they looked at it closely, and they looked at it based on both economic indicators and sort of life expectancy and quality of life and community well-being, they actually found that some of the most advantaged places, that the majority of the most advantaged places in America were rural. You know, rural lost population for the first time ever in the 2020 census, but in the years since that, it's actually seen an uptick in population. And some of the places suffering from the most acute labor shortages in the country are actually rural. So there's places where there are far more jobs than people to fill them. So when you actually look at it in the aggregate, the overall picture for rural America is more mixed than people recognize. There's new opportunities for industrial development through clean energy and technology. It's where we're going to continue to get our energy. 99% of the wind turbines in America are in rural America, more than 3/4 of the solar farms. There's so much green manufacturing in Georgia that there's a swath of Georgia that's become known as the Battery Belt. And the drive to reshore manufacturing adds to that opportunity. The AI revolution, for better or for worse, data centers, you're seeing that, whether that's an opportunity or not. I think, and that's the key. It's not so much the what as the how. I think there are opportunities, but as we work to revitalize local communities and create that opportunity, I think the question is, are we going to create economic structures that allow the value and the wealth to remain local and even be widely shared? Or are we going to reproduce extractive economic models that rural's seen for a long time? The models of the past that they might provide jobs now, but leave places with limited resilience and even actually agency over the management of their own assets and resources and their future. And so how does federal policy play into all of this? Well, back in 2020, we landscaped the public federal investment available to rural areas for community economic development. So on the left are federal offices and agencies where resources are available. In the middle are issues that they support, economic development, health, education, so on. On the right are the congressional authorizations. And if you squint hard, you can see that many of those authorizations date back 100 years or at least decades. So this is a challenging maze to navigate. I don't have to explain that to you all. Any of you who have tried to find federal funding that fits for what you're trying to do. And it's where, especially challenging in rural places where you often have one person who does many things. You've got limited administrative staff at city halls. 3/4 of these programs actually While they represent an opportunity for rural places are actually in the mix with urban and suburban. They're not rural specific programs. And when you put the constraint on administrative capacity in rural places together with the constraints of the programs, which often have matching requirements or even scoring criteria that disadvantage rural because you're looking for scale or return on investment, it makes it really difficult for rural places to access their fair share of this capital. So on the one hand, this is a product of a responsive government, right? Congressional members have created these programs because they've heard felt need from constituents. But really, it signals, I think, a lack of a coherent vision for how rural places are going to succeed in the 21st century. So as a nation, we don't really have a rural policy. We have a bunch of programs. And that's even gotten more complicated since we landscaped this in 2020. So when you look at the Biden era policies, we saw significant expansion. We saw once in a generation expansion of federal resources for infrastructure, clean energy, reshoring manufacturing, supply chain resilience. The government recognized actually during the Biden era that rural places, even with all of that new money, often aren't able to access those resources and make it useful for what they're trying to do at the local level. So they tried to do some actions to improve that access, create an initiative called the Rural Partners Network, for example, where they were placing federal staff on the ground to help navigate that maze that you saw on the previous slide. But it was an experiment. It was limited to select communities in 10 states. But it also created an aligned and interagency process back in Washington, D.C., where agencies were at least trying to work together to align their resources and both reduce the redundancies and actually make those resources more flexible. You had bipartisan legislation that was introduced to create a new rural partnership program that would have gotten money directly, actually, to local rural places. The proposal got into proposals for the Farm Bill, but the Farm Bill never got passed. So while there was a recognition about how the limits on capacity make it difficult for rural places to access federal capital, unfortunately, we didn't get too far in addressing it during the time of the administration. You had innovative new place-based programs created. These weren't rural specific, but they're programs like the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, the Recompete Pilot Program, tech hubs. And they're designed to help out on economic opportunity and even that economic opportunity across different geographies. And we had some rural places able to compete, but again, the scale of competition and the scale of resources were a real mismatch when it comes to rural economic development. I also think you had sort of back to that vision of how people think about what's helpful in rural places. You still had a view that large industrial development was a good thing. Massive energy projects. There was a massive, for example, massive offshore wind project that I profiled on the podcast in Northern California. Massive manufacturing. $10 billion investment by Intel in the middle of Ohio, in central Ohio. But going on to a former 800-acre hog farm, actually. And the president even touted that in the State of the Union. So you could see sort of the vision of how industrial development would be good for rural America. But at the same time, the 15 surrounding rural jurisdictions for that massive undertaking and manufacturing plant, they found out about that at the same time as the general public did. They were not actually at the table trying to steer what was going to happen and how the benefits would happen in their communities. Then we switched to the Trump administration. And so while we went from, I would say, a once-in-a-generation expansion, now we're seeing a once-in-a-generation sort of contraction of the federal footprint. You saw that with freezing programs and staff. You've seen reductions in force and staff. USDA has announced a major reorganization. All of that creates uncertainty for who rural places are actually going to be even able to access within the federal government. You've seen a shift to the states, a greater responsibility, and that specifically in the One Big Beautiful Bill, where shifting responsibility to states for paying more of Medicaid and SNAP, and anticipating the contraction that's going to happen. That creates a lot more uncertainty, because not only does that mean trying to find the healthcare coverage for other people, but those are economic anchors. The healthcare infrastructure, for example, is an economic anchor in many rural communities. You have uncertainty coming even from global policies like the tariffs and immigration policy. A big question mark whether even the rural development programs that are usually authorized in the Farm Bill continue to make it, and will we pass what's now being called a skinny Farm Bill, because a lot of the nutrition programs and the commodity subsidies that happen in a Farm Bill have already been passed through reconciliation packages, both in the Biden era and in the Trump era. So that's just creating even more uncertainty. And again, I think you still have this frame of reference that large-scale industrial development will be good for rural. We've kind of switched from clean energy to AI and data centers. But again, a real big push and a real big incentivizing from the federal government for those industrial places, for those industrial kinds of development to come into rural. So before I leave this and get into some of the themes of what we've been hearing through our analytical research, I would say this is an uncertain environment, and it is going to remain uncertain for the near future, and probably potentially through the administration. Keep your congressional members close. Our experience in Washington, D.C. is that congressional delegations don't have a clear line of sight or visibility even to how this is impacting people at the local level, or impacting practitioners who are trying to put capital investment together at the local level. They need to hear from you often and regularly, not even in an advocacy point of view, but just that here is what is happening. Here is the level of complication that this is creating for what we're trying to do. We have plans, we have visions, but it's going to be really hard to pull them off in the kind of uncertain environment that we have. And they should actually be advocates back to the executive branch as well. Build relationships with the executive branch to the extent to which you can, but that may be harder because there may be fewer staff and more dispersed staff across different federal agencies as well. And also recognize that you need to be engaging with your state officials, because they're going to have to be the ones figuring out a lot of change on their budgets and their programs as well, because of the way in which the relationship between that federal money that usually goes through state is happening. So not much more to be able to say at this point other than that you're going to see an uncertain environment. Continue to build relationships with your congressional delegation as well as your state legislators. Continue to be engaged on those particular conversations so that they actually realize what the impacts are of the different changes that are happening, and you could try to influence some of that change. So I'm going to go now to just some themes, though, to suggest that even in an uncertain environment like that, there is a lot of good to be done, and there's a lot that you can be doing. And some of these are lessons that draw from the podcast itself, which has actually turned into sort of a major research stream. Shameless promotion, it's called Reimagine Rural. Find it on any platform that you can get a podcast on, wherever you listen. And it came out of a sense of knowing that the national narrative around rural places is often one of gloom and doom. I knew that there are places that were actually making progress on their economic development aspirations, and I wanted to understand how those positive changes were occurring and whether public resources and public policy decisions were being helpful or harmful. But at this point, I've conducted about 135 interviews now across 40 places in 26 different states. And I would also say that some of the lessons that I'm going to put out here are also reaffirmed by a community of practice that I'm facilitating of senior executives from place-based foundations across the country that serve primarily rural places and are trying to support economic opportunity in those places. And even some private roundtables with experts like economists and sociologists that have been trying to track when rural development works well. What are some of the key elements to making that successful approach? I brought along some friends from the podcast, hopefully this will work, to share some of their reflections that shed light on some of these themes. These are the voices of local people that are really talking about what's worked for them. I don't think that any of this is going to be new to those of you in the audience because you've been working in your communities, but maybe it's a way to provoke and reaffirm what you're both feeling and working on right now. And the first is that any positive momentum in a community is just grounded in local leadership. It's leadership that's born of a love of that place and a concern about that place. And frankly, it's leadership that has a certain mindset. No one's coming to save us. This is up to us. And actually, things are possible if we think boldly enough and we work strongly enough together. And you can hear that in the clip I'll play from Paul Cloutier, who's a town councilman from Humboldt, Kansas. Humboldt's a town of 1,800, calls itself in the middle of everywhere. 2 hours from Kansas City, 2 hours from Tulsa, 2 hours from Wichita, Springfield. About a decade ago, it had a downtown that was basically boarded up. And it's now such a destination that in 2022, the New York Times put it on its 52 best places to visit list, alongside Monaco, Vanuatu, and Marrakesh. I was like, okay, how did this happen? So Paul and I met in the hitching post, which is what he called a modern honky-tonk, decor from another century. He says it's the best collection of specialty whiskeys west of the Mississippi. And when I talked to him, it was clear that there was a mindset and an attitude that started to emerge from that conversation that really is indicative of a lot of the local leaders that I talked to.
You know, it's this region of Kansas Southeast that has, in many ways, has suffered a lot, has really struggled with infrastructure investment. It is a very rural place that has, for much of the country, has kind of been forgotten. And so because of that, it has meant there is the flip side of that, there is a lot of opportunity to improve things, to have an impact here. And that's really a big part of what's so attractive about it. We see it the other way around, which is build a town you want to live in, build a town you want to spend money in, build a town you want to stay in rather than leave to go spend money somewhere else. And you will start to see regeneration happening.
I just love that. Build the town you want to live in, build the town you want to spend money in and stay in, and you will start to see regeneration happening. I mean, Paul is part of a local group that they put together called A Bolder Humble, and it's right there, like even in the title, Bolder. And I think that's the next thing that I would talk about. Pretty much all the places that we've been profiling that have seen really positive momentum happening and the attraction of capital into those places, there is a civic culture and a momentum that is just about local leaders coming together to work together and creating sort of authentic relationships to solve local problems. It's intentional. It starts small often, actually. It's iterative. And those small things lead to bigger things that sort of create a readiness for even really significant investment over time. But it's not instrumental. It's not like everybody doesn't get together and say plans and say, okay, we're going to bring in a big investment to sort of fill the gap of the mill that just closed. It is actually, we're going to get our hands around doing this small community effort and involve as many people as possible in it. We're going to build relationships through doing that, and then that will lead to the next thing and the next thing. And it's actually fairly organic. Next, you're going to hear Luke Glazer from Hazard, Kentucky, which at one time had 10 coal mines, 10 major coal mining companies operating in their town. They're pretty much down to, a half at this point, but have seen a real incredible regeneration of their downtown. Again, basically was boarded up about a decade and a half ago, And now it's a vibrant place with sort of a very interesting vibe that's drawing people to their town from all over not just Eastern Kentucky, but the other states. And Luke's going to talk about just, a set of community folks that started to get together.
There was a group around that same time that got organized called Envision Hazard. It was just a community action board. It was just a bunch of people who were invested in making downtown a thing again. And it started with small things like an event, a float in the annual parade. And I think one of the big things they did a party on top of the parking structure downtown for Hazard's birthday. And that was a big festival and a big thing. And you can come downtown and it's safe and everybody has a good time. And so Envision kept meeting, and when I decided to run for office in 2018, around that time is when we started getting a lot of traction for a downtown coordinator, someone who could work on downtown full time. And so in 2018, in the fall of 2018, all those things happened. New commissioner comes on, new group of commissioners comes on, new mayor comes on, and one of the first things that the mayor and the county judge executive did was hire a downtown coordinator, somebody specifically devoted to downtown. And that's really where you see an inflection point.
It's really interesting because he's talking about just a group of volunteers getting together, doing small things like community festivals, party, just draw people downtown, make people sort of trust downtown again. And then it grows into a place where they actually convince elected officials to put some investment into hiring a downtown coordinator. And so it's not just about creating that civic culture, but it's also about creating the capacity, and I'll talk a little bit later about how even partnerships are really important in building that capacity to have that intention to go bigger and bigger and bigger. But that inflection point of actually bringing on that hired downtown coordinator was a huge step in them filling those boarded up downtown businesses and creating the necessary environment for them to both bring in capital as well as the technical assistance for those downtown businesses. The next thing that I'll talk about is quality of life, because again, traditional economic development, often focuses on getting that investment from the outside to come in to your particular place. But and then the idea is once we have that investment, then we'll have the amenities to be able to ensure that the town has what it needs to keep quality and standards of life high. What actually we've been seeing a lot of is either a focus on quality of life alongside those efforts to bring in outside investment or to even go bigger, or actually even just starting with quality of life. Building the place to live and work, and you heard that even in Paul's initial comment. Invest in the things that people feel like they need to be excited about living and working and proud of a place. In fact, a lot of the times I'll even hear through the podcast, people just fixing things up to make them look beautiful as being a catalyst for a whole bunch of other things that happen and creating readiness for much bigger investment. And I think, again, that's part of a mindset shift. This is Beth Barlow, who's part of a Boulder Humboldt with Paul in Humboldt, Kansas. And she talks about how it's important for that mindset to be, think of yourself as worthy to have those quality of life amenities that bigger places have. Beth grew up in Humboldt, then she lived overseas. She lived in a couple of other places before she came back to Humboldt. And she talks about the store that she was creating when she came back to Humboldt.
So I started having adult classes.
Oh.
And finally, the adults came to me and said, we see what you're
You
doing
worked
for
there,
our
you
kids.
didn't work
We do
there.
want to be
Part
in
of who we
but
were.
we also
And expectations are
But we
high.
had to figure out how to
million
remain a
dollars.
Milltown.
So they started coming in and telling
So
me.
somehow that didn't go to Beth, but it went to
Best
Gloria,
we are to make
number 4. So if you could just click on number
I started
3.
having adult classes. And finally, the adults came to me and
You
said,
worked there, you didn't work
we
there.
see what
It
you
might be
Part
that
of who
the
we were a
clip didn't
Milltown.
make it.
But we had to figure out how.
Sorry, guys. That's what happens when we try to get tricky with the
I think
technology.
there's a tendency
Ah,
in
there we
small
go.
towns
That's it.
for for us to settle for this is good enough. You know, let's slap a little paint on the front and open the doors. And that's just not really what we wanted to do. It's not really what we thought we wanted to be affiliated with. It's not what we deserve. I think that we often settle and we think we don't deserve for the place to actually look nice. It just needs to function. And gosh, if I open a candy store, I want it to be beautiful. You know, I want it to be a destination. I want all the feels when I go in there. It's part of the experience of living somewhere else. And I always thought, you know, why shouldn't we have that here? We should have that here.
So Beth opened up a candy store in Humboldt that was probably one of the reasons why the New York Times directed people there, because it wouldn't be out of place in Paris, France. And I can say that because I lived in Paris, France, and I mean, seriously, the chocolates and the macarons and everything that was in there was just as nice as what you might experience overseas. This next one, you know, I call collaboration for capacity, and frankly, this is a huge one. I could spend a whole day actually talking about the kinds of partnerships that are necessary to pull this off, you know, significant renewal in rural communities. But in every place, new ways of working across sectors, across partners, often with what my colleagues at the Community Strategies Group at the Aspen Institute called Rural Development Hubs, often with organizations that are regional or maybe even outside the community that have experience with accessing capital or putting capital stacks together, have some experience with planning, and also, you know, help communities actually that are fairly decentralized even work together. But even at the local level, you know, seeing the faith community create a new alliance that then is going to work with the downtown business community. Partnership is just a part of this at the very core. And having the mindset and intention out of those partnerships. Those partners often bring data as well. Data can be very hard to get in rural places, but it's actually really important to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And I'm going to play a clip from Gloria Dickerson, from Drew, Mississippi. You know, so Drew is a place where Emmett Till was killed. It's still a persistent poverty community. But when you go into that community, you can actually see the signs of rebirth. Now, they're not out of persistent poverty yet, but you can feel the momentum that's happening. And Gloria talks about some of the basis for that. Yeah, so clip 4.
So I started having adult classes. And finally, the adults came to me and said, we see what you're doing for our kids. We do want to be in your classes, but we also want to do some other things in this community. We don't just want to come to classes. We want to improve this town. So they started coming in and telling me about what Drew didn't have. We don't have a grocery store anymore. We don't have any recreation for our kids anymore. Our roads are torn up. And so I said, so let's stop talking about what it is that you don't have in this community and what do you want in the community. So we changed that conversation around. They started to say, we need better school, we need better streets, we need food, access to food, we need access to health care, all kinds of things that they wanted. And I said, okay, well, if that's what you want, we can do that. That's all y'all want, we can do that. So they said, well, I said, we can't do it alone. We're gonna have to help somebody to come in and help us get this done. But I'll call on some people to help us get this done. So that's when we started the Drew Collaborative. And that was the community came around. We organized the community. And the Drew Collaborative came into existence.
Yeah, the Drew Collaborative is a partnership between, as you said, key partnerships in the community and community residents. But the collaborative also has a regional community development finance institution as a part of it. It's got a regional planning group that's a part of it. They have strong relationships, actually, with some of the state, the relevant state agencies. And it's not even a formal thing, right? It's not like part of formal governance, but it has created a sense of we can work together to get these particular things done and create momentum and a narrative about what's possible going forward. And I think, what's part of all of this collaboration, it's really relational, and it's based in trust, and it's based in a commitment to place that's actually not going to stop over a year or 2 or 3 years, but it's going to take the time necessary for it to be achieved. And for this, we're going to hear from Brandon Dennison. He's the founder of an organization in Southwest West Virginia called Coldfield Development, working with former miners. They started off doing workforce development, but he's leading up a coalition that was awarded $62.5 million from the Build Back Regional Challenge that was run by the federal government, by the Economic Development Administration, that's focused on helping 21 counties in rural West Virginia shift from the coal economy to a clean energy economy. I love one of their businesses. It's called Solar Holler. But to his point, and he'll talk a little bit about this in the clip, it kind of took them 10 years to get ready for the investment of that size. 10 years of building trust in the places that they were working, 10 years of iterating to see how they could be successful with the work that they were trying to do, 10 years of developing partnerships. It was actually 3 organizations along with Coalfield that were the hub of putting that application together for the $62.5 million. And they got it matched with philanthropy and other state funding. So they actually have $100 million in total. So play clip 5. Thanks.
There is a risk that expectations are high, and expectations are high. I mean, $100 million is enough to do big things, and we need to do big things. And it's also true, it's taken generations to get where we are economically, socially, environmentally. Hopefully it doesn't take as many generations to get to a new place, but this is generational work. And I think, sort of circling back to what made us ready for this, the main thing that made us ready for this is local community-based organizations with locally based leadership committed to this for the long haul. So I think a lot of times, this is a 4-year program and the government wants to say, we're going to transform the regional economy in 4 years. And I think the reality is you're going to see some transformational outcomes, but it's going to take other programs and it's going to take other efforts and other investments to completely transform the entire region. I mean, we have to be honest about that. And it's taken 10 years of work to be ready to make $100 million do big things, and it's going to take another 10 years worth of work to make $200 million do big things. And so we've got to have local leadership invested for the long haul to really make a difference in these communities.
So that consistency of commitment is just fundamental. But I also loved how he said, you'll see some transformational outcomes, but it may take a much longer time to see a full transformation. I think that's also a mindset, right? Don't get discouraged when the whole thing doesn't happen overnight, but continue to understand the progress that you're making along the way. And frankly, the story, that's part of creating a story and a psychology that a community tells about itself and a narrative about what the future might be and might be possible for. The story that a community tells about itself, its history, what its assets are, and what its future might be, are as important as anything else, actually, in this rubric. And I'm just going to play a clip to end on by Zeb Mathers, who's the mayor of Canton, North Carolina, that a couple of years ago lost their paper mill that had been around for 115 years, lost 1,000 jobs along with it, and then 2 years later got hit by Hurricane Katrina. And they are in the midst of trying to think about what their transformation looks like going forward. But he is very attentive to the story that they need to be able to tell to take the town along with them to that future. So play clip 6, please.
Whether you worked there or you didn't work there, it was part of who we were. We were a mill town. But we had to figure out, how do you remain a mill town without a mill? And we're going to give it our best, and we are, to make that happen, because a mill town is not defined by the machines in those four walls. It's the people, it's the character, it's the sacrifice, it's what you set out to be. And I think our attempt to maintain that and to build our future around those character traits, those great American character traits, young families, public education, outdoor rec, I think that's a real big, ambitious plan. I think we're up to the task, but I think a lot of people are ready to embrace that. Those things still matter. And so again, just like the floods, I want our legacy to be more of just being rebuilt or recovery or pity. We want people to look at us as a sense of hope.
I think that's a good note to end on. You're going to be in an uncertain policy environment. You need capital. It may not always be there, but continuing to catalyze that sense of hope is actually going to be fundamental to any change that you're going to be able to make. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony. In these uncertain times that have been stated throughout the morning, with all the noise coming from the federal level sounding like nails on a chalkboard, I'm certain of the incredible, resilient, and brilliant work happening in Maine's most rural counties. And I'm very excited to welcome Sarah up here to talk about one of my favorite ones.
Thanks, everyone. I learned so much from your presentation, Tony, and I also think Washington County feels so seen by what you tell, and we didn't queue up our themes to work together, but it's going to look like that because I talk a lot about story. So here is Machias. I'm the town manager of Machias. This picture was taken about a week ago by the preeminent drone photographer of Washington County, Ryan Malagara. And it's some beautiful autumn foliage and morning fog over the Machias Dike. How many of you have been to Machias? All right, pretty much everybody. Awesome. And even if you've been to Lubec or Eastport, you've probably driven across this road. It's pretty important to us. So Machias is a small, resilient town on Maine's eastern edge, and this is my story about what it means for a small community to stay in conversation when the decisions get tense and big and complicated, and when most of the decision makers sit somewhere between Augusta and Washington, D.C. So again, beautiful Ryan Malagara photography. This is Machias, the heart of town, the Memorial Bridge, the Bad Little Falls Park. And Machias is the shire town, the county seat of Washington County. I think we're the smallest county seat in Maine. Washington County is the state's largest producer of blueberries and Christmas wreaths, wild blueberries and Christmas wreaths. And those are two happy exports, I think. But I've always thought that we have something even more valuable to share with the world, and that's the way we embrace community in Washington County and Machias, and how we're using those personal connections to take on critical coastal infrastructure challenges right now. Now, I've lived in Washington County for almost 13 years, and maybe not here, but if we were in Washington County, you would already know I'm not from there. But it's our chosen home. We moved there when our kids were 4 and 10. We finished raising them there, and we love it. So for years, I told the stories of Washington County as the local newspaper editor. And one story I heard again and again and again was that Washington County is forgotten and that we always get the short end of the stick, nothing good happens here, and that we're on our own. But stories have power. Thank you, Tony. The stories we tell about ourselves become the realities we live with, and lately we've started telling a different one, a story about collaboration, persistence, and showing up for each other even more than before. And there is some truth to the old story about Washington County being getting the short end of the stick sometimes. Washington County is a county unlike any other of Maine's coastal counties. It's largely rural. We struggle more with poverty there. It's at the end of the road, the easternmost county in the U.S., and we face challenges that aren't as pronounced in our more affluent neighbors' counties. But one thing we're wealthy in is community. And I think maybe it's because we do all sit together at the end of the road, and also because we really just have one grocery store. So don't go to Hannaford unless you have time to chat. So, okay. So this is, Machias sits at the confluence of two rivers, the Middle River, which is the one winding its way down here, and the Machias River, which is running across the bottom. The Middle River comes down out of Marshfield, freshwater, obviously. The Machias River is tidal, and it's coming down from a series of lakes over Bad Little Falls, and it's going out through East Machias, through Machias Port, where I live, and then into the Machias Bay. And this is the dike, right at their meeting point. And this visible flow of water you see there is only possible because the dike is breaking down. It shouldn't be going that way. It should be coming out the other way. Sorry, click, okay. That's partly because some of the timbers currently in the dike are also in this photo. So that's a structural problem for sure, so. There we go. So in fact, it was the Middle River and Machias River Basin that attracted Machias to be settled. In 1763, there were fires burning down in Scarborough, and a bunch of families fled, and they started looking for somewhere else to be. And they were drawn to choose Machias because of the salt grass that grew abundantly along the Middle River. They said, this is the spot. And many of their descendants still live there today. Like, I probably know at least one from every single family. We have that kind of heritage there. And families, as you can see here, still hate the Middle River shorelands, just as they did 2.5 centuries ago. That's the tippy top of the Middle River up there. And then something else happened here. 12 years after they settled, yeah, Rhiannon's laughing. I'm not letting this one go without talking about our big battle. But in 1775, the same river was the setting for a defining moment in Machias's character, when a band of local patriots, just woodsmen and farmers, captured and hid a Royal Navy ship after the Battle of the Margaretta. The first naval battle of the American Revolution, no matter what Connecticut tells you. And the Margaretta sat here for a year before being put back into service as a privateer against the British. And today, many descendants of the original battle participants do frequent reenactments, including my husband, who is always enlisted to help out as the British, because all the local boys want to play patriots, and he's from away. So this is his first appearance as Captain Moore, who sadly died from his wounds after the battle. So what we call the dike is actually a causeway. If you've been to Machias, you may have been to Helen's, which is down here in the lower right of this picture. Blueberry pie, yo. It's actually a causeway with 4 dike culverts built into the western edge down here where you see the water coming out, as it should be. When it's working correctly, the gates on the 4 culverts close when the tide comes in, preventing salt water from entering the Middle River, and then when the tide goes down, the fresh water from the Middle River flows back out. It's been many years since the dike has been working correctly, and since its original construction during the Civil War era, it's been built and rebuilt several times. So today, as you can see, it still carries Route 1 across the rivers, connects every business, school, and hospital trip in our region. We've had to have it closed for work a few times, and it adds about 10 to 15 minutes to any run to the Machias hospitals. So it isn't just infrastructure, it's our lifeline. It's also its own small economy. It's home to the Machias Farmers Market down here at the bottom on this backside. And all those cars are there for a year-round pop-up market that brings people to town and to the dike itself. And one thing I want to mention is that Washington County is often the poorest county in Maine. It flips in and out according to median income. And Machias has just in recent years been the poorest town in Maine. So having this kind of accessible marketplace with zero cost to entry is really important for us. And along the back, that brown trail, that used to be the Calais rail line. And now it's the Down East Sunrise Trail. So that brings and carries thousands of people into and through Machias every year. It's also a really important economic artery for us. So the dike matters, though, not only for what it carries, but for what it represents. In 2009, the Maine Department of Transportation held the first in a long series of public hearings about how the Machias dike should be replaced. It's been degrading. It's been known to be degrading for that long. Many residents, at that time most, called for an in-kind replacement. Just give us the same thing again, identical to the first one, just stronger and safer. And at the time, that was the public consensus. During that meeting, our state senator then, Kevin Ray, summed up a deep feeling that still echoes today. The area's greatest fear is of the federal agencies over which we have no control. 16 years later, that fear has shifted, but it has not disappeared. It's become something more complicated, more entrenched, a mix of concern, uncertainty, and determination to be heard that, as you can tell, this is still an open conversation. That fear is part of the story that we tell about ourselves, the story that decisions are made far away and we're just left to live with the results. But as of last year, we're beginning to write a different story, one where our voices reach the table. This is the dike, and you can see the Sunrise Trail. I think it would have been a beautiful rail line, and the Roosevelts would have taken that to go to Campobello, just fun fact. So many public hearings and one giant pandemic later, Maine DOT settled on its preferred solution, said that's it, okay, we'll do it. We're just gonna rebuild the dike as it is. And they were going to adjust it for sea level rise, of course. But meanwhile, conservation groups started proposing a more open span that would restore tidal flow like an open bridge, improve fish passage, and they hope to rebuild the salt marsh that would have previously existed up inside the Middle River. And there were hints of lawsuits. Things were starting to get really heated and really ugly. Tensions grew between the landowners who feared losing their fields and conservationists who feared losing an ecosystem. And each side's fighting for something really important. They're devoted, to their causes, to their land, to their community, and they're also all devoted to Machias. Like all these people that I'm going to be talking about, not only do I see them at Hannaford, but I see them at every single event. They're all stakeholders for sure. So in 2023, MDOT recognized that the culverts were sinking faster than a solution was approaching. So they built a temporary bridge called a maybe bridge. Before that, my kids and I would drive over it and just be like, whoa, that bump's getting a little deeper. That bump's getting a little deeper. The timbers are settling. I don't know if this will play as a video. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so everybody probably remembers these. Then came the winters of 2023 and 2024. This is the dike, one of the many times that a storm surge overtopped it and shut it down. And we didn't know, was it doing structural damage? It's okay, we got through it. But the same thing happened up and down Maine's coast, as we all remember, I'm sure. And in Machias, this kind of, it flooded downtown every time, right? And it's actually not the water rolling in that floods downtown, we learned later, but nevertheless, it was no fun. And the flooding's become almost routine. In 6 years, we've had 900-year floods, so that's not good. So for us, the question isn't really why it's happening, but what we're gonna do about it and how we can build back in a way that protects the whole downtown. My predecessor, the late, great Bill Kitchen, I hope you got a chance to know him, took this picture when he was town manager. He stood at the center of this controversy and these tensions for his entire tenure as town manager. And after the floods drove him and his staff out of the Machias town office, which is a couple blocks from the dike, he said to Dr. Tor Johnson, we have got to fix this and we've got to get everyone at the same table. They were all, fighting. Together, Bill and Tora, who works with the Sunrise County Economic Council, who is amazing, conceived a grassroots plan inside a savvy governmental container. And so began the Upper Machias Bay Master Plan, created to bring together people with generations of passion on everything from clam flat protection to wastewater management to downtown flooding to conservation to farming the Middle River. But at the center of it all stands the fate of the Machias Dike. So those are the 4 culverts, and the third one in fell off recently. And there's nothing for it. We can't fix it again. The DOT's already tried to fix it. The guys in the Middle River are getting soggier and soggier. They can't mow, where they used to be able to mow because so much water is moving in. So with the Upper Machias Bay Master Plan that we started last November, the leadership committee alone contains 40 members, of which about 20 to 25 are routinely active. And we meet every month, and then there's a steering committee. We meet every single week, and we're having a series of public hearings. And on that leadership committee are local officials from surrounding towns, every single town surrounding Machias, because they all rely on Machias. We are, the service center. We got the grocery store. And we've got conservation groups, we've got landowners, and I think most amazingly, we have the Maine Department of Transportation and NOAA. So the federal agencies have a lot of pull here and a lot of concern, and they're a huge part of the process of any kind of bridge rebuild like this. So each of us brings our own version of the Machias story, shaped by what we value, what we've lost, what we're trying to protect. And we're all clear, though, we don't control what happens to the dike. Those decisions rest with the state and the federal agencies, but we can show them what we want as a community. This part always gets me a little emotional because I think it's really cool. From the start, we set the ambitious goal to reach our conclusion not through a vote where some people win and some people lose, but by consensus or not at all 40 people. It has been, this is when they I didn't point it out, but part of that is them putting a new little bridge over the holes that are falling into the dike. That was 2 years ago. That's its usable lifespan. Now we get a new one this year, and it'll close for a little while we do that. So we began meeting last November, and it has been challenging every step of the way. We're considering a range of options for the dike, from a replacement in kind to a series of mixed closed and open culverts to a full span. A hydrological study funded by one of the conservation groups involved showed that our downtown flooding problem actually is not helped or hindered by putting a span in, so that makes us free to kind of consider a wider range of options for replacement. But there is wariness, and there is distrust, and there is fear. And there are moments when I think we may not all finish this process at the same table. We recently had a very challenging meeting. But even in those moments, I believe we're changing the story from one of division to one of persistence. Beautiful Machias, dike on the right. I still hope we'll reach consensus, but even if we don't, I know that every meeting, every hard conversation is creating change, meaningful, generation-shaping change. We have agency over the stories we tell, and therefore over the realities we create. It's the very qualities of small-town rural Maine that make this possible: the persistence, the closeness, and even the stubbornness. The same things we sometimes see as limitations. We're changing our story together. We're here to write a new one. And in an increasingly depersonalized age, the Machias area is leaning into face-to-face, neighbor-to-neighbor conversations, and just as importantly, we're leaning into conflict. And it may not work, but even if it doesn't, we'll know that much more about who we are and how we function as a community, and that's what it means to stay at the table. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. For the handful of you here who know me well, you know that in any given room at any given moment, I'm usually the one with the loudest commitment for amplifying rural youth voices. And today, I just don't think that that's the case. So from Washington County to Franklin County, please help me welcome Bonita Tompkins to the podium.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Bonita Tompkins, and I'm with the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies in Farmington, Maine. And I'm truly thankful, honored, and honestly thrilled just to be here today. This is one of my first speaking opportunities, so I am a little nervous, I will admit. So a little bit about our journey and what we've built at CES since March of 2020. just 2 weeks prior to COVID, we decided to open up a retail store, and instantly thought, should we retreat? But I had a armload of kids with me, and I couldn't turn away from that. So since then, we've done hard, very, very hard work, and we've created some real opportunities for rural youth. And it has not been easy. We've been scrappy, resourceful, and sometimes one step away from not knowing whether or not we would make it one more week. And I've held my breath more times than I can count. And that's unfortunately the reality of working in rural Maine, where isolation, poverty, and the lack of opportunity can weigh pretty heavy on a community. But what we're doing at CES is about turning that reality around, not just for one group of kids, but hopefully for future generations. We're building hope, purpose, and belonging, and doing it through the lens of business and entrepreneurship, because when young people can see themselves as creators, not just consumers, everything changes. Back in 2019, before CES even existed, I was teaching a class, and I did something simple but powerful. I included them. We started with a SWOT analysis. I apologize. Okay, so we started with a SWOT analysis, and we started looking at our community, and we said, what are our strengths and what are our opportunities? We skipped right past the weaknesses and threats because everybody already knew what those were. And honestly, it wasn't the entrepreneurial mindset that we wanted to cultivate. And instead, we started having some real conversations about struggle, about what it means to grow up without options, and how to stop the cycle of poverty before it starts. The students who were in that class still stay in touch with me today, and they were a part of it from the beginning, everything from designing the logo, picking out the colors, what are our colors, and setting up the checkbook, and then applying for our 501c3 status. And they did the pitches, they did the PowerPoint presentations, and they built this with me. And today, that little seed has grown into something incredible. CES is giving the youth the tools, the confidence, and the space to lead. It's definitely messy, it's imperfect, it's scrappy, but it's very real, and it's changing lives. So I want to share with you how we've done this and how we've included youth every step of the way. And I invite you to imagine what this may look like in your community, or even join me so that we can strengthen it, so that we can share it statewide. So what's happening in Farmington? We have a retail store and a makerspace right on Main Street, and it's a 3,000 square foot building where kids are doing everything from placing orders to checking people out, learning to have conversations, learning how to communicate and grow that confidence. And so we're empowering these kids. It's a beautiful thing to watch, and I have an incredible front row seat to watching those plumes come out once it just clicks. And it sounds really nice and tidy on paper, but what it really means is this small rural town, it's giving kids an opportunity to be able to see what is out there beyond just this little community that they feel a little isolated in. We're bringing it to them, which is incredibly powerful. So these kids are not just participants, they're co-creators. And honestly, it did start with my passion, and it was definitely a deep conviction that I couldn't stand to watch the kids fall through the cracks any longer because they were never given tools to climb out of those cracks. So from day one, my mission was to build something that teaches skills, builds confidence and nurtures independence, all the while tackling those real community needs. Because when young people see that their work has purpose, their ideas matter, they rise to it. So what this looks like in action is I would love to share some photos with you next. And this is what you see when you come to 156 Main Street. You see kids in the makerspace creating things and selling them. You see them learning about what is the cost of their goods sold, what is your time worth, and how is it that you go and talk to your customer, and how do you sell your product. And they're getting immersed in an experience that is an incredible teaching tool. They're learning all about business as at the ripe age of 10 all the way up to 24. We're working with a very broad group of ages. So we've done some incredible things in that building over the past 5 years. And in addition to that, you know, we ended up saying to ourselves, you know, we need to serve more kids. How can we go about doing that so that way we can be sure that we have more opportunities for kids? So lo and behold, a piece of property came up for sale, and we had no money. So we said, well, let's see if we can try to owner finance this property, and if we can kind of come up with something kind of cool to do here, because it's 6 acres in size and it's 9/10 of a mile away from the high school. Let's see if we can do it. And so we did. And it was again scrappy. And this parcel is now thankfully financed by the Genesis Fund, who happens to be here today. And you know, we are sometimes making our payments a little late. And they've been so wonderful to us in financing this. And some incredible things are happening on that parcel. Kids are learning about community and learning about volunteerism and how to create a garden and feed people, and feed people by donation. They're doing some incredible things. They're getting their mentors. It's a beautiful thing for sure to watch. So an additional project that we took on was my concern for homeless youth. We had 48 kids that were homeless at Mount Blue High School, and I just said to myself, how can this be? How can this be that we have 48 kids that are homeless here? And I felt that we needed to do something. So we did, and took on another project, and decided that we were going to try to build a tiny home. And again, it was very scrappy, and we were doing this in 2022-ish, right around 22, 23, and we weren't getting too far along, so we decided to go out and outreach Maine Cabin Masters, Kennebec Cabin Company, and I pulled in there one day and just said, I know this is not typically what you do, but could you help us build a tiny home for homeless youth? And Chase just rose to the occasion. And we did an episode with them as well, and built our first tiny home for homeless youth. That has not been perfect either, but we're learning and we're doing it and doing the hard work. And what's incredible about this is that this experience, the kids are so connected to. They're so proud to say, I was a part of that, and I made that happen. So that little house sits on that parcel that is financed by the Genesis Fund, and kids drive by it every day on that school bus going to and from the high school, and they get to say, oh yes, I was part of that. And again, they're very, thank you. Thank you. And they're proud. They're very, very proud, as you can tell. And it makes kids dream, and it's a beautiful thing for sure. So just want to talk briefly a little bit about the transformation and what I see with these kids. I have this wonderful young lady named Sophie Haley Vigu. She was one of the first kids that came to CES, showing up just about, I don't know, about maybe 2 weeks after COVID kind of locked down. Things started to open up again. She showed up at our doorstep with holding a Ziploc baggie full of earrings. And they were all these little cute earrings that were made from toys. She would buy these eggs at Walmart, and she'd buy, massive amounts of them because they were littles. They were these little tiny toys. And she would buy them and then pair them up and take her earrings and her little screws and put them in. And I said, okay, well, what's your company name? Oh, I don't have one. I said, okay, do you have a logo? No, don't have one of those either. Do you have a display? Nope. So I said, all right, let's sit down. And so we sat down as a group, the kids and I. We didn't really have very much other than some shapes, some really rudimentary type of software. And she came out with this incredible logo that looked just like her. And I started watching her sell, and she's getting a little more confident and more confident in herself. And she then started selling. She started selling to the college students. And I was watching her, and she was, kind of getting a little more pep in her step. And then I started seeing the pediatricians come in and buying 10 at a time. And I was like, what is going on here with these earrings? These little toys. And so I finally had to stop one of the pediatricians and say, why are you buying these earrings? Are they for the staff or something? She said, oh, no. I wear these so that way I can get kids through physicals without any kind of problems. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, then along comes December. It's Christmas time. And she would sell these earrings at $5 a piece. And in December, she sold $900 worth of earrings. And let me tell you, there was some pep in her step then. And so the spark was lit. And so before I knew it, watching her, we'd be going places. She'd be in my car, and she said to me one day, I think I'm going to rebrand myself. And I think my jaw hit my floor because I was like, what? You're saying the lingo. You're saying the lingo about rebranding yourself. And I said, tell me about that. And she said, well, I want to expand into sweaters and crocheting and scarves and hats and things of that nature. I was like, okay. So she did. And then before you knew it, she's Sophie Haley Vigu, or Sophie Harper is the name of her brand now. And she evolved to a point where she then started teaching classes in the makerspace to the younger kids. And then she evolved to getting an internship, and then considering going to art school down in Georgia. And she ended up going there, but then came back about a year later because she didn't get along with a roommate. So, which was okay, but still to this day, she's now in college, and she's doing amazing. She still sells her products at CES. They're still popular. The kids, people come in all the time and buy Sophie Haley Vigu earrings, and I call her my what is this designer a quirky designer, and it's of course escaping me at the moment. Betsy Johnson. Thank you. Betsy Johnson, yes, Betsy Johnson of Maine. And but the transformation in her was incredible, was absolutely incredible. So what I've got now is I've got myself a bunch of little leaders. I've got a bunch of little leaders that, as you can tell, are very confident. And that's the one thing that everybody tells me, is that your kids are so confident. And it's been an amazing process to watch. And again, scrappy as all heck, but it's an incredible process to watch. So now, where we're headed, which is really exciting, is we have hopes and plans to build a campus on Whittier Road. And what we want to do is we want to be able to expand into agriculture, culinary, outdoor rec, of course with our retail as well. And these are the plans that are our renderings that have been drawn up by Platt's Architecture. And that blue building over there is what we hoped will be a building we partner with somebody on building modular homes. So that way we can respond to the lack of affordable housing and try to be able to teach kids how to apply the beautiful education that they receive at these career and technical education centers, and being able to apply that in doing good for our community. So in a nutshell, I'm going to wrap this one up, but I would love any kind of support that you could send our way. We are fortunate enough to have been connected with some incredible people with the Department of Labor, and we just completed an NBRC grant, Northern Border Regional Commission grant, and we're crossing our fingers. We think we're going to do wonderful on this, but it's going to give 48 kids some incredible opportunities in learning entrepreneurship, and as well as applying what it is that they learn into their community. So please reach out if you have any kind of thoughts or advice. I'm open to it, and I thank you all very, very much for listening to our story. Thank you.
Is this on? Amazing. Thank you all so much. I'm sure I'm joined in some speechlessness here, but since I had a little bit more time to prepare a question, I can kind of kick us off in this Q&A. But since I know we're full of the most brilliant minds in the state, I did only prepare one question because I know you all have questions to ask as well. So the flow of this will be, there's a mic stand here in the middle. We have about 20 minutes for Q&A. Yeah, about 20 minutes for Q&A. If you want to just come and kind of form a line here at this mic stand, we will ask and answer questions that way. And just a reminder for everyone, question askers, question answerers, to speak into the mic so everyone can hear us, and then also the folks that are joining virtually. So I'll ask a question, but don't all rush to the mic stand at one moment. My question is, I'm curious to hear from kind of all levels some tips and tricks when it comes to building local leadership capacity in these places where people wear multiple hats, work multiple jobs, manage multiple projects. What do you see works and really brings people to the table and builds that local capacity?
I guess I'm starting. Oh, it's on. There we go. So it's not an easy question because people are doing lots of different things, and there's only so much time in the day. Certainly, and one of the themes that I was highlighting just out of the presentation was partnership, and building relationships both among folks who are in the community that can bring new people into particular work, making them feel comfortable doing that work, but also bringing capacity from outside as well. Finding the right organization, whether it be a regional organization or other, to actually start to build relationships with organizations that have access to other technical expertise, might have experience putting capital stacks together, doing project development, those sorts of things. I will also say, not for the local people themselves, but for organizations that are working either at a statewide or more of a regional level, actually providing opportunities for peer support where people from local communities are connected to other local communities. Peers who are trying to figure out how to actually get as much time out of the day in doing all the different things that they're doing. And frankly, even building sort of, like I said, the partnerships internal to a local community. Some of like the first case study that we did actually for the podcast was in a town where I went to elementary school. I'm from small town Pennsylvania, north central Pennsylvania, and we saw partnerships between a New Faith Alliance, a new downtown business alliance, where the business owners were they were part of like a multi-county chamber, but that didn't work for them because it's their local place. So they sort of created their own downtown business alliance. And then creating that partnership actually across different levels of government. They also created a good relationship with the local state legislature, who then got them into connection with some of the state agencies that they needed to be able to take advantage of in finding the financing. So it is about it's about relationships, it's about partnership, and I think it's just about being focused on what kind of capacity you need as well.
Yeah, from a municipal perspective, in Washington County, we're hugely supported by, as I mentioned, the Sunrise County Economic Council. They probably extend the town's capacity for grant writing and program management by 40%, and for free, so that's incredible. But in terms of like bringing people to the table and getting them engaged, I just think it's about inviting everyone individually, and and continually inviting them. Like probably most small towns, we have a huge cast of boosters around Washington County, people who show up for everything. But we're doing our comprehensive plan right now, and anytime someone tells me they ride a bike, I'm like, oh, you should come to our transportation meeting, and people like to be invited. And I haven't actually made this happen with you yet, but Larissa's going to help us with our airport committee because she's from Washington County, and she's an airport consultant. Oh my goodness. So when we get really rolling with our new airport expansion, I'll be delighted to have like a local woman on Zoom helping us with that. And we have a recreation committee where we have another young woman who recently graduated from Washington Academy who's studying landscape architecture, and she's Zooming in for that. And her mother works for SCEC, and she's my planner. So I think I think people like to be invited, and I think I get 10 no's for every yes. But unfortunately, there's just no substitute for pounding the pavement.
Hold it. Okay, great. Thank you. So I think I'm still learning. I really do. I don't know if I could talk confidently about all it is that I need at this point. I know I need a lot of money. I do know that much. And I do need a lot of expertise. I need help with figuring out how do I braid and stack a lot of these resources? How do I get myself a seat at that table? And it's taken a lot of grit and perseverance for certain. So I really think I'm still learning, and I'm hoping I can learn more here today too myself. So
I love that answer. Thank you all. Are you a question? Incredible. Yeah, and if you...
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm Nancy Williams, and I'm a director of Waterville Community Land Trust. And you, Benita, you mentioned something about housing. And I would love to know more about that. And I just want to say, I'm sure for everyone here, you are a remarkable person. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're so sweet. You make me cry. Thank you. Thank you. I really hope... I've got to believe that there are enough people in the world out there that understand that everybody needs a home. Everybody deserves a home. And I think to myself how fortunate I am to have my home, and how I wanted to take all those kids home with me. And I just knew it wasn't possible. And, I think... No, I know we can do this. There's no doubt about it in my mind. When you give somebody purpose, it's a pretty magical thing for sure. Thank you.
Another question.
So just in terms of housing, I mean, I think it's probably one of the most underreported national stories right now that housing is as difficult in rural places as it is elsewhere. And I do think that that's brought a new recognition that any kind of economic development or community development planning that's going on, projects that are being put in place, needs to have housing at the table. And there are also different things that communities are doing. You know, absentee ownership is often, you know, an issue, especially if you've had out migration from the community. You know, kids are inheriting houses that they're no longer living in, those kinds of things. So that's an issue that some communities are using to take on. Refurbishing older housing stock and finding creative ways to do that. But I think the bottom line is just that housing needs to be front and center with any kind of development plans that are happening on the economic side and on the community side.
Well, here. We need housing. That's
Mic drop
it.
moment.
We definitely need housing in Machias. And I don't work for Sunrise County Economic Council, but they are working to bring someone on staff. Actually, they have someone identified to help us build that capacity as a region.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So my name is Peter Garrett. I ain't from here, like you, being from away. But when I came here, there was an opportunity back in the 1980s when the Soviet Union seemed to be breaking up and opening up, when I saw that there was a possibility for a sister city for the Waterville area, Waterville, Winslow, Fairfield, Oakland. And we did actually get to establish a sister city in Russia. It was very similar to what we have here. It was a city where 2 or 3 rivers come together. It was had an airport, that was a major rail terminal, and had a college too. Unfortunately, it still exists, we still exist, but there's no communication because of the efforts that are going on now to reestablish the Russian kind of empire. Unfortunately, but during that time, it was a very good effort. It was not only built community here, all the kinds of things that you were talking about, Tony, about bringing together people from different parts of this community to make it happen. But the schools played a huge part in it. And in fact, towards the end, it was wonderful when we had Zoom coming in. The kids in Cortlandt, this was the name of the town, would get on their Zoom, and our kids would get on our Zoom, and we'd have conversations back and forth. But the first effort was actually kids taking a trip to Russia. And myself and my daughter and a Russian lady who lived here being the first people to be there. And the communication was mostly kids starting it off, and then visits of lawyers, of town leaders, so this afternoon I'm leading a trip down on the riverfront where you'll see some birches planted by the leaders of Cortlandt when they came here. So I was wondering whether any of you have any experience of the kinds of things that you do so well with another country. How often do you talk to, for instance, the people along the coast in New Brunswick? Go on, carry on.
No, I don't. But you, you have reminded me that there is a Machias, New York. And for years, long before I was working for the town office, I thought, wouldn't it be so fun if we did a pen pal exchange with the kids of Machias, New York? Because it actually was founded by settlers from Machias, Maine. And occasionally, just a couple weeks ago on Facebook started serving up Machias, Maine, all of Machias, New York's news, and there was an outcry, like, when did we get that kind of sewer? You know, but so we should know more about them. So I think that's a lovely, fun, upbeat way to enhance our story. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I've certainly seen, so one of the things I guess I would say is relationships outside of the community can bring new ideas into the community. That's even why gatherings like this are so important, because learning what other communities are doing and seeing the success or the challenges that they're facing provides a lot of insights into what's happening in your own community and the work that you're trying to do. We just did a case study actually through the podcast this season of a small town in Minnesota, a conservative town, that went green. And one of the ways in which that happened is because they built a relationship with a very similar town in Germany. There was German legacy in that particular town. That city was looking for a way to become energy independent, especially with what was going on with Russia and was happening in Europe at the time. They saw a lot of investments in clean energy as their future, as a way to lower their energy costs in a very pragmatic way. And it frankly created a conversation in the community in Minnesota that said, wow, we see ourselves in that same future. We want energy independence. We want lower costs. They're a town of a similar size. They're doing this. We should think about doing it as well. And it actually helped the town come around and create sort of the collaborations that they've got a collaboration between the local branch university, the local school system, the city government, and the K-12 school system. It's not an official partnership. There's no governance. There's no, they haven't created a 501c3, but they meet on a regular basis every month, challenging each other as to what they're doing to be able to bring their energy costs down. And actually to create now they're investing in trying to create new markets and new, sort of a new business entrepreneurial system with some of the things that they've been doing that are more sustainable. But a big part of it actually came out of the relationship that they had with a German town of a similar size that had similar issues. Frankly, from my perspective, that's one of the things that we can be much better doing, either with state policy or with national policy, is even just not necessarily even doing global partnerships like that, but to network leaders and towns and projects that are doing that work here locally or across the nation. I just see it too many times. People take a delegation to another town, whether it's in another state, but it's of a similar size, they've got similar assets, and just learn a lot about what happened in terms of leadership, sequence, capital, and planning to all make it happen there, and provides a lot of grist for the mill for what can happen back home. And those kinds of relationships and peer support and peer exchange and peer learning, I think, can be really, really powerful.
Thank you. Can we take 2 more questions or just one? Do we have 2 sincere questions here? We got sincerity? Okay. You with the first sincere question, you on deck with the second sincere question.
Thank you. I'm Ellie Daniels, and I'm a Waldo County resident, and I have a business that I opened in 1993 in Belfast on Main Street. Our chicken industry collapsed in 1989, really earlier than that, but that was the real death. And much of our downtown was closed, and we kind of didn't know what we were doing, but we're still alive and thriving today. My business is called The Green Store. And what I want to know is Belfast has become a real destination, a place that people want to live. We had a tremendous influx of people during COVID that were semi-retired or retired. And the result of it is, like so many towns in Maine, we have a terrible shortage of affordable housing. It's very difficult for restaurants and shops to get workers because nobody can afford to live in town. And we now have a town government that kind of holds on to what to me are old ideas that the way to cure this problem of high taxes and so forth is to invite large industry into town. And we recently have gone through a 7-year process of keeping a large foreign corporation, a land-based aquaculture project that was going to be hugely polluting, out of our town. And it has divided our town. And I was really listening to what you were saying about the stories we tell ourselves about our communities. Can you talk, I'm sure all of you can, a little bit about this kind of ever-present dynamic tension between corporate money, which runs the world, and even runs the grant makers and runs the nonprofits in indirect ways, and what happens in these towns that have such successful downtown renaissances like Belfast, but are essentially micro businesses. And the truth is that what brought Belfast over the edge was MB&A coming into town and being incredibly beautiful corporate partners with so many desperately needed infrastructure improvements. But the bank that bought out MB&A has not been the same kind of corporate citizen nor other large industry in our town. Could you speak to these issues?
I'll go first. All right. I remember your resurgence in Belfast because my family used to go up there in the summer before everything took off. Speaking only for Washington County, we envy your problems. Speaking for Machias, we are facing a really serious tax situation. And our concern right now is how do we, this is from Kevin Greer, an artist who used to live there, how do we vivify and not gentrify? And, but the solution I see on the horizon is actually more business, because right now the line in our area, and we're just not at your stage, the lion's share of our taxes fall on homeowners. And a lot of those homeowners, as you mentioned, Tony, inherited these homes. They haven't been maintained or weatherized. They're, and the taxes are climbing. They're not climbing astronomically, but Machias, you may have heard we've got a county budget problem right now that's going to really jack everything up or increase our taxes in the new year. And we're deeply concerned that we won't be able to hold on to the services that make us attractive to locate business there long enough to get businesses there to help with our taxes. Because we have a full-time fire department, we have the ambulance service for the region, we have sewer transfers, we have all the services. And I mentioned earlier, we're only 14 square miles. We're the smallest county seat. And if anyone else is a county seat person around here, county seats typically just don't have a lot of taxable land or services because all the important nonprofits are located there. So, but I remember I've certainly have followed your struggle with the aquaculture situation down there. And in terms of healing, our story isn't done yet with the dike, but I do think everyone will be able to shake hands at the end of the day. And I just don't think there's ever anything for it but being willing to be there in the ugly, person to person.
Yeah, so it's hard to, I don't want to cast generalities onto a very specific situation, but that is the tension that you talk about, sort of with outside investment, outside decision-making over that investment, as well as locally grown leadership, business, infrastructure. Balancing that and getting that right is, there's no magic formula. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of relationships. It's a lot of inviting people in. I will say that a couple of things that that I've seen that have helped communities, especially at that stage where you're basically trying to protect the integrity of what you've built, what you've got, because you realize that your distinctiveness is part of the appeal, yet at the same time, you recognize that you need the assets that are also there and to be able to balance all of that. Data helps. Data can lower temperatures. So is everybody actually looking at the same data and understanding what story the data is telling them, both the financial data and the outcomes of that financial data? Often people get very, they get a point of view because of of what may or may not happen with a particular intervention. And that's what you get, that's what you start doing is you building your case around that. But it's important to have actually data that everybody trusts and agrees on the data itself, and then that creates the basis for sometimes a more rational conversation. But the other is really relationships. And again, it is inviting, and it is inviting in folks that might completely have the opposite opinion. It is a small d democracy discipline, and not just inviting, but people love food, and trying to work through that as a community and having outside help in working that through can be helpful, as long as everyone trusts the outside group that might be facilitating those conversations as well. Those would just be a couple of things I'd offer from the experiences we've had in the analytical work and the case studies we've done.
We have to wrap up. Thank you all so much for listening and asking questions, and then of course our three incredible speakers. So let's give them another round of applause.